Welcome to the Teaching Change podcast, where we explore issues of social entrepreneurship, education, and innovation. I'm your host, Jared Calicay. Welcome, Jason Green and Nara. Very excited to have you both on Teaching Change. I'm excited to kind of talk about what social entrepreneurship is and what it means to the world, and also have you share about your new adventure in publishing a book. So I'll allow you two to introduce yourselves, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. So I'm Jason Green. I'm currently the Assistant Director for PSU's Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative. So I've moved from teaching social innovation, running social innovation programs, and studying social innovation to being directly involved and hopefully enacting innovative approaches to addressing homelessness, housing, and security. In my previous role, I'd worked really closely with the co-founders of Grameen Intel, which is a really remarkable social business that was formed through a partnership between Grameen Trust and Intel Corporation. So the book is The Rule of One, The Power of Social Entrepreneurship. And we have co-founder Narayan Sundararajan here with us.
Yeah, hi, this is Narayan Sundararajan. I go by Nara. I'm the founding CTO for Grameen Intel, the entrepreneurial venture that Jason just mentioned. And I'm also a director and a senior principal engineer who's really passionate about applying cutting edge technologies towards social impact at the global scale.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, welcome to both of you. And also you have a third to your triad as well. Do either one of you feel comfortable kind of I know he's not able to join us today, but kind of introducing him and giving us his background?
Absolutely, yeah. So the third author of the book and also my colleague and co-founder, Kazi Haq, he's with Intel Corporation. He's in Intel Capital on the finance and the legal side. And he's the co-founder of Grameen Intel, and he's a CEO of Grameen Intel Social Business.
And I should clarify that I don't have a role in Grameen Intel and its startup or growth. I was just excited for the opportunity to chronicle sort of their journey and share it as a case study with my students initially, and then that case study grew into a book to share with students and colleagues.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
And we are so happy that Jason chose to do it and did a fantastic job of it as well. Thank you. Yeah.
So as an educator myself, I am frequently working with entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs, especially in the social sector, and frequently writing cases and working with cases. So what I'm interested to kind of know is when you all started working together, was the idea always to write a book, or did that kind of come as a byproduct of a good relationship?
I think it was very much a byproduct. We had worked together on writing a case study on Grameen Intel that I used in my classroom that we made available online and placed in a finalist in a international competition and got a lot of traction. And I think Kazi and Nara had been thinking about what it might look like to write a book, and they mentioned it to me. And I had sort of independently been thinking that this would make a really interesting book to expand on that original case study and bring in a lot more of their story and their journey and some more theory and best practices around social entrepreneurship.
Gotcha. And so Nara, why don't you tell us a little bit about Grameen Intel? Now, our listeners are familiar with Grameen Bank and family of corporations, but tell us a little bit about Grameen Intel and what it is you guys do and how long you've been around and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. So Grameen Intel was formed about 9 years back, and this was a result of our chairman at that time, Craig Barrett. He had actually started a program called the World Ahead Program, which was looking at how do we enable technology solutions to reach the next billion and 4 billion. And in one of his visits to countries around the world, he had been to Bangladesh, and he had met with Professor Yunus, who who had won the Nobel Prize by then. And they had an interesting conversation about working together. And Craig Barrett, after that visit to Bangladesh, returned to Intel and pulled a small team together, including myself and Kazi, and said, "Hey, I met Muhammad Yunus, and we really wanted to see if we can go do something together." And that was the action item that we got from Craig to go figure out what that something would be. And that's how Grameen Intel got started. And it was modeled after the social business concept that Professor Yunus has been talking about at that time, which is a non-loss, non-dividend company. And fast forward 9 years, we are developing technology solutions to really kind of address some of the biggest social needs in the areas of agriculture and healthcare. And the idea was Intel brings in its technology prowess and technical expertise, and combined with the rural outreach and the knowledge of the base of the pyramid from Grameen, the power of the two could really combine and create solutions that could have massive global impact.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. And so it's obviously an international endeavor between two gigantic organizations. How was that process in 9 years ago, kind of bringing those two together to make something that would be really impactful for the world?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jared. And in fact, in one of the chapters, we actually kind of go through how do we kind of bring a completely profit-driven company like Intel and a non-profit, social impact-driven Grameen. And truth be told, it wasn't easy, right? The incentive structures were different, the working styles were different, the timelines were different, the patience was an interesting aspect. So all of it were kind of, I would say, challenging in the initial formation. So in fact, we literally essentially took a year and a half to 2 to really kind of understand the language, understand the legalities around forming a social business. And add to that, we really wanted this entity to be based out of the place where we wanted to have impact and not be kind of doing it out of the US or sitting in our ivory tower, kind of creating solutions. We really wanted to be in the geos or close to the geos we wanted to get our solutions to. So that added another sort of complexity to it in terms of understanding the norms and regulations. So it was an interesting journey, and one of the things that we did was really kind of jot down those experiences so that when another person or another entity tries to do this, hopefully they have not necessarily the complete playbook of how to do this, but at least the mistakes that we did along the way, right? So that they can use that in their own journey.
Absolutely. And so what in your background kind of equipped you to get involved in this, but what has kept you going for almost 10 years?
That's a great question again, right? So so in terms of the background that kind of got me into this, at Intel I've done different roles spanning different business units. One of the roles that I was previously doing before founding Grameen Intel was I was a global program manager for technology and emerging markets for healthcare, right? And as part of that, what I had done was really work with the UN organizations, various governments and NGOs, and really kind of understanding the unmet needs largely from a healthcare standpoint, really things around healthcare delivery, access, and pain points, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and I developed technology solutions to kind of see how we can improve the efficacy and the efficiency of healthcare systems around the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that definitely kind of was already in the making in terms of my expertise. But the other thing that kind of uh, really pushed me towards this experience was actually a personal story. All right. While doing this healthcare in emerging markets, I used to travel quite a bit across Africa and Asia and Latin America. And while doing that, I used to visit all kinds of healthcare clinics and facilities. And while doing that, and also while doing a documentary on AIDS along with my wife, I contracted tuberculosis,
Wow.
uh, and it was kind of a bad thing from a couple of viewpoints. That's when my wife was pregnant, and we were expecting our first baby, and here I was uh, coughing quite a bit, and then diagnosed with tuberculosis. And right when my son was born, the day my son was born, I was actually wheeled into a surgery room, all right, to
Wow.
have a surgery, right? And while that was bad, the thing that nailed it was I had to be on tuberculosis drugs for the next 6 months, and what these drugs do is make you extremely hungry, right? While you're taking it, and I was just imagining the plight of daily wage earners while I was
Mm.
doing this, and it turns out that this was hindsight. It turns out that many of the tuberculosis incidences is in daily wage earners, and they have to take these medications that make them hungry. And also, what happens is once you take these drugs, you become better pretty quickly, but you're supposed to go through that regimen for at least
Mm-hmm.
6 months. And what the rickshaw wallahs and daily wage earners do is really stop it
Mm-hmm.
after say a month or so, because it's just that it makes them really hungry and they don't have the money to go have that kind of nutrition that I was able to offer.
Wow.
And that was a telling moment for me where there are things that we kind of take for granted that are not the norm. And that really strengthened my resolve to kind of go do things that actually make a difference in the base of the pyramid. And healthcare is where we started in Grameen Intel for that reason. And also the other part of it was how do we use technology, in particular cutting edge technologies, to really point it at the problem that can have massive social impact. I know that's a
Absolutely.
long-winded answer, but I really wanted to kind of. There's always a personal angle to many of these stories, and
Absolutely.
we felt it was very important to kind of bring that forward in that book as well.
That is a great motivator. I'm sure that's sustained you. What kind of successes have you had in with Grameen Intel?
Yeah, so as I had mentioned before, I think our focus has been around a couple of key verticals, which is around agriculture and healthcare. And we have solutions in each of those areas, right? And just to give you a concrete example, in the case of agriculture, we specifically focused on smallholder farmers, and the reason being over 70% of the world's population still is directly or indirectly tied to agrarian economies. And
Mm.
if we have poverty alleviation as one of the key goals, which we do, uh, taking care of pain points of smallholder farmers is a natural sort of a goal, right? And for the smallholder farmers, the solution that we developed were really targeted towards his or her four key pain points during a crop cycle. And very simply put, it's essentially what to grow, how to grow it well by providing the right sort of nutrition to the crop, and how do we prevent pests from attacking that crop, and how do I get the best price for my produce when I harvest it. It's really down to those four key tenets that a smallholder farmer kind of leads his or her life around. So what we did was really kind of develop point applications that can run on any low-cost phone, smartphone, or a tablet or a PC that provides clear recommendations that are actionable by the farmer so that ultimately they can increase their yield, decrease the cost of, decrease their expenses, which is essentially cost of fertilizers and inputs, and really how do we increase their income at the end of it. And we've had some really good success stories, both at the very local level. We started a project called Project Harvest in Bangladesh, where we essentially created social entrepreneurs who would buy our solution, which is essentially a phone or a tablet running our app and a soil testing kit, and they would essentially go provide recommendation services to farmers who are then able to increase their income by increasing their yield and decreasing their expenses. And also we have had good success working at the other end with governments. So we did a nationwide deployment in Cambodia, working with the government there, the Ministry of Agriculture, IDE, and other NGOs and implementation agencies, where we really took our solution and enabled the Ministry of Agriculture extension officers to go provide these recommendations. So we have done work on both ends of the spectrum. One at the, hey, let's create jobs, creating social entrepreneurs, providing recommendations, to working with the government, really tacking our solution to their existing extension, agricultural extension system. So that's one example of a solution that I'm really proud of. It is by no means as scaled as we would like to be, but I think we are in the path to scaling it more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and when we talk about scaling, I'd like to bring Jason into the conversation now, because when we talk about scaling, not only your own endeavor, but also sharing the story more broadly, I'd imagine the book comes into focus, right? Because you're trying to create a ripple effect, if you will. And so, Jason, I understand you wrote a case study on Grameen Intel, and it got some traction there. And then who was it, and how was what did the conversation sound like when you said, okay, we've got this case study, let's write a book. Let's write a book to share this story so others will follow.
Yeah, I think Kazi actually reached out to me and said that they had been thinking about writing a book, and I had been thinking the same thing. And it seemed like a natural fit that they had, more that they wanted to share. And I wanted to expand it into a book because I've been teaching social entrepreneurship and social intrapreneurship for years, and had a lot of trouble finding an approachable social intrapreneurship book that took sort of real world stories and then added in some of the theory and best practices of social entrepreneurship. And yet I was seeing a lot of demand from our students and from practitioners in that kind of a resource. Yeah. We were having more and more students coming through saying, I don't necessarily want to be an entrepreneur because the topics I care about have incredible social enterprises already working on them. I want to support these organizations, or I want to work in government, or I want to work in a big corporation to do this type of work. What is out there for me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So you had kind of struggled in your own teaching, kind of struggled to find a good resource for social intrapreneurs. And I would agree. I mean, I am really excited about this book for very selfish reasons, because it'll help me teach social entrepreneurship to all of my students. Because like you, I run into a lot of students who go, you know what, social entrepreneurship is really exciting, but I don't see myself being the guy or the girl to start a company. I want to go and work for another company and do this kind of work within that company. And it's really hard to find examples. And so you realize that. And then how was the writing process? What did that look like? I mean, you've got 3 authors, 2 co-founders, and a practitioner turned academic, all together on this writing project. What was that like?
I thought it was very collaborative. So Kazi and Nara, would send outlines or write entire parts of the book around sort of product development and challenges they faced, their personal journeys as entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. And then I was, writing bits that are saying, okay, well, this is really interesting. What they faced here is a good example of this theory. And the tool they applied here relates to this specific toolkit or this best practice. Or, I was able to bring in a lot of that theory and a lot of the tools that are out there, some in design thinking and human-centered design, some in social entrepreneurship, some of the entrepreneurship tools that are around, and kind of create this narrative of Grameen Intel and say, here's what happened, and then here's how it relates to this theory. And then here's what they did here, and here's a tool that they used, or here's another tool that has since become available that could have helped. And so I think we were able to put it together in a way that it's not a textbook, but it's almost like a narrative textbook where you have a narrative, you have a great story, and you're able to thread in the theory and the tools and the best practices in a way that I think is really engaging. I hope is really engaging.
Yeah, it seems like you kind of tiptoed the line or towed the line between textbook and getting really scholarly and kind of a field manual more so to really influence the practice in the field of social entrepreneurship. Would that be a fair understanding?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. We were trying to fill that gap that was out there, where a lot of practitioners aren't necessarily going to sit down and read a textbook. But a lot of the sort of field kits and guides that are out there might have a few little sort of tiny case studies, like, 1 paragraph breakouts here and there. But there isn't sort of a strong narrative thread that pulls all together and makes it a little more approachable. And they seldom bring in some of the theory that's been developed by academics that can really help provide sort of a grounding and a framework for understanding all the different pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. The theory and practice, right? You're really uniting the two in a best case scenario. How long was the writing process for you all? Was this a labor of love over several years, or did it come together pretty quickly?
It was a long process. It was several years, and we went through several publishers.
Okay.
It's such a new field that sometimes when we were working, even with academic publishers who had published titles in social entrepreneurship, they'd say, what is this? What's social entrepreneurship? What are you talking about? So we found ourselves, and Nara, I think, could probably add more to this. I felt like we were a little too cutting edge at the start when we began the book a few years ago. I think now more publishers are like, oh, yeah, I am hearing a lot of demand for that type of work, and I've seen more articles and more toolkits and resources around entrepreneurship in the last year or two. But it was very challenging at first to get publishers interested, and then even some that were interested, it just ended up not working out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Nara, what did you think about? I mean, how was that process for you? Because clearly in your role with Grameen Intel, I'd imagine one of your job requirements was not write a book. So, how was that process for you? And especially when you're, where the marketplace, so to speak, doesn't really understand or appreciate what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think, a couple of things, right? I think one of the things we felt pretty strongly was, especially after we met Jason, was the fact that this story needed to be told, not necessarily for it to be our story, but really that there are folks who really could benefit from this narrative, right? Because it was is really um, interesting mix of experiential and theoretical learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what kept us going in terms of publisher after publisher, as Jason mentioned,
Yeah.
and but the really good news was when Penguin, we reached out to Penguin Random House, and we sent the editor a draft, or potential editor at that time, a draft. She just jumped on it, right, saying, "Hey, this is fantastic. I like the way that this is a personal journey interlaced with actual theories supporting it, so that it is not too fluffy, right? Pardon
Mm-hmm.
the pardon the word there, but it is actually grounded on either theories that we were unconsciously following or actually consciously, right? And that's what Jason did really, really well, which is kind of combining that uh, knowledge of the theoretical knowledge along with the narrative of an experiential journey that serves the purpose of, if somebody wants to go down this path, here is one way folks did it, here are the mistakes that they learned from, and
Mm-hmm.
here's how they could potentially go do this. So the process itself was extremely interesting for me. I learned a lot, right? In fact, truth be told, I learned a lot about the theories from reading my own book,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, right. So that was very interesting, right? And also the other part was we didn't want to keep it. We didn't want to make it too dry. So there's always a sort of a personal undercurrent, including names of people who maybe actually interacted with. So yeah. So we to put it very succinctly, we wanted to keep it honest and real.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and it's a true, then it becomes an authentically true story. And and what I love about the book is that you, like you said, you share the mistakes, you show the warts, so to speak, of the work itself. um because one of the things that's sometimes difficult, especially in social entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, writing, is that we have this tendency as human beings to look through rose-colored glasses on all of the things we've done in the past. Oh, of course we were a great success because look how great we did all these things, and we don't, and somewhat
Yeah.
we're kind of almost afraid because there's a vulnerability, right, in admitting you messed up on some things. Um, how did you balance that? Was it because there was the three of you writing that you were able to be more vulnerable, or did you guys really have to pull it out of one another?
Um, Actually, I don't think it was too hard. I mean, initially, I mean, the crux of it is when Kazi and I thought about uh, the, the the structure of the book and the topics we wanted to cover. The first idea that we had, and when we have also chatted with Jason, was really that each chapter heading would be a lesson that we learned,
Mm, mm.
right? So it wasn't actually we didn't have to pull it out of each other. It was fairly natural
Okay,
in terms of that's the way we even thought about the book, right?
that's great.
Um, and again, the book itself is not a here is a success story, go read it. Absolutely not, right? It is
Hmm.
actually the here is our journey, here is where we are at, here are the things that we have learned. It is still an experiment in progress,
Hmm.
and we wanted that humility, and not just for pretending to be humble, but it is really the case.
That was really exciting for me as a as a teacher and as an educator, was that Kazi Nar was saying we want to really highlight where we got things wrong and what we learned, because that's so essential for a successful social entrepreneur or intrapreneur.
Hmm.
Um, and they wanted to be this guide that was very honest, and hopefully they could avoid, help future social entrepreneurs avoid the same mistakes and learn from that. And I thought that was a really valuable approach.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that I
Great
think
point.
I know my students anecdotally gain a lot more from learning what I did wrong in my own businesses and my own path, than what I should, what they should do. I think it just becomes a lot more real, and one of the biggest things about, starting this podcast is, and most of the work that I do in kind of the field is preventing people from having to make the same mistakes that others have made. So I really appreciate you all taking this approach and so forth. Now the book itself is out, right?
Yes, it is. Actually, just to add one more thing to the last question, something that
Sure.
just bubbled up. Kind of careful to balance, to your point, balance lessons learned with success story, because we also didn't want to give the impression that, man, this is so hard, right?
Oh, yeah.
Don't even get into this.
Yep.
Right? So there are examples of some beautiful projects that I'm super proud of. And example is our maternal wellness bangle, where we finally kind of nailed it, right? In the sense of, yeah, it took a couple of tries, but we really loved the way we finally ended up with that product, right? So so we wanted to carefully balance the lessons learned with some success as well, so that it's not all, man, what am I getting into? Right?
Yeah, it's not all doom and gloom, right? Where you're just scaring people off of the field. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
I totally understand that. A little spoonful of sugar, right, helps the medicine go down. I think that's what that's what the movie Mary Poppins used to say. Absolutely. So one of the last things I want to ask you two gentlemen is, if everything goes exactly the way your wildest dreams, what would the result of the book be on the field and on academia, etc.? What would the result be?
I can start. I think in terms of academia, I would love to see social entrepreneurship embedded more and more in social innovation and social entrepreneurship programs. I'd love to see these programs move a bit away from the myth of the heropreneur, the person who comes in with the amazing idea and solves everyone's problems. And, that's just really not how these things tend to happen in the real world, at least not the successful businesses and social businesses. And so I hope that books like this can help push people away from that a bit. And then in terms of business, I really hope it will help other corporate managers and executives see that they have amazing possibilities to act as entrepreneurs, to live to their values, and to launch businesses and programs that can really make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. If I may add there, Jared, maybe I'll take the three categories that I really want to see how this done. Right, the first one is around folks who are wanting to do something similar. I really hope this book kind of encourages 1,000 flowers to bloom. Right, so that's really the goal of this book, to encourage, inspire, cajole, nudge, whatever verb you want to use, so that more people out there see this as a possibility, and not just as a possibility but also a mission. Right, that's one. Mm-hmm. Number two is from the corporate side, not just corporate America, but the corporate world out there. I would be thrilled if even 1% of their CSR budget, the corporate social responsibility budget, actually goes towards putting a stake in the ground and actually creating opportunities like this, whether it's a social business or a social entrepreneurship opportunity for folks within the corporate world, go solve big problems. That would be just phenomenal if we can start a movement where it is not just 100K fly-by volunteerism, but really putting a stake in the ground, taking some of that budget out. So I think those are the two categories. And the third one is really in the academic world, as Jason mentioned. I think there should be part and parcel of not just entrepreneurship is taught, but really how business is taught, right?
Mm-hmm.
Economics is taught. And I hope this kind of helps serve a tiny bit of that hope in academia as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the concept and the approach and the work of this, I think, is going to go a long way. I really appreciate both you gentlemen sharing your stories with me and sharing it with our audience. In kind of closing, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we conclude?
I think please go read the book. I hope it inspires you. Stay inspired, and really take it upon you to go solve some of the biggest problems in the world. Yeah, you are the change.
Yeah, I think people need to realize that regardless of their role, they don't have to be an entrepreneur. They don't have to be, working in international development. Everybody has a role to play, and they can build on the skills and experience that they have to find a unique role to really make a difference.
Till next time, be nice and change some stuff.